I spent 15 years telling myself that. Every lonely night, every missed birthday, every Christmas I spent eating a supermarket sandwich in a cold London flat instead of at my mama's table in Georgia would be worth it when I saw my daughter living the life I'd bled for. Every pound I earned running my business over there, I sent home. Taxes, renovations, new roof, new floors, every upgrade on that property had my fingerprints all over it. On the days when the UK rain felt like it was going to drown me, I'd pull up the photos of that big house on my phone and say, "That's my baby's future right there. She'll never have to scrub toilets like I did." By the time I finally stepped out of the high car in front of the place, it wasn't just a nice house anymore. The market had gone crazy. The agent told me that old estate I'd bought for a song had turned into a nearly $9 million mansion with the land. White columns, fresh paint, manicured lawn that went on forever. I stood there on the gravel in my sensible shoes and nice UK coat, suitcase by my side. Heart beating so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. 15 years away. 15 years of soon, baby, soon I'll be back. Have you ever had your whole life boiled down to the walk up one driveway? I was rehearsing what I'd say. Surprise! Maybe look at you. When the front door swung open, a woman came hurrying out carrying a linen basket, eyes down, wearing a Maid uniform crisp enough to cut. For a second, I didn't see her face, just a gray at her roots and the weight of tide in her shoulders. Then the light hit her just right, and my breath left my body. It was my daughter. She froze on the steps like she'd seen a ghost. I opened my mouth to say her name, but her eyes slid past me, to the car, to the road, assessing me like I was a delivery he hadn't ordered. "Ma'am, you can't be here," she said automatically, voice flat and polite the way black women make their voices when they've learned not to scare white money. "The owners don't like people coming up without an appointment." "Ma'am, owners!" It took every bit of self-control not to stagger backward. "Baby, it's me. It's Mama." Up close, I saw lines in her face that shouldn't have been there at her age. A dullness in her eyes that reminded me of women I used to work nights with, not the bright girl who used to talk about grad school and passports. She blinked, recognition flickering, then panic smothering it. "Please," she hissed, lowering her voice. "Go. If they see you here, they'll be mad. I have to get this done." Before I could answer, a man's voice barked from inside. "Girl, why are you just standing there? Those sheets better be on the beds before Mrs. Carter arrives. You think we pay you to socialize with every person who wanders up the drive?" He stepped into view, a man in a golf shirt and entitlement, my son-in-law from the few wedding pictures I'd been sent. He looked at me like I was a delivery he hadn't ordered. "Can we help you?" he asked, all fake politeness. My daughter flinched like a scolded child and ducked her head. "I'm sorry, sir," she murmured. "Sir! In my house! Have you ever looked at a scene and felt the ground tilt like you'd stepped into the wrong movie? I left this estate to her. Her name was on those trust papers before his ring ever touched a finger. And yet here I was, fresh off a plane from the UK, watching my own child scurry past me in a Maid uniform while a man who had never missed a meal on that land talked to me like I was trespassing. Every instinct in me wanted to explode, to march up those steps, snatch the basket from my hands and scream, "This is hers! I built this for her! Who do you think you are?" But 15 years of doing business with people who underestimated me taught me something. The person who loses their temper first usually loses. So I swallowed that scream, fixed my eyes on my daughter long enough for her to see that I saw her, then stepped back down the drive. I pulled my UK mobile from my bag, thumb hovering over a number I hadn't dialed in years but knew by heart. My old lawyer answered on the second ring, that same calm Georgia drawl sliding through the line. "Miss Ellis?" she said. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." I stared up at the mansion, at the windows my money had replaced, at the porch my money had rebuilt, at the doorway my daughter had just disappeared like a stranger. Felt the fury settle into something cold and sharp. "I'm back," I said, "and we have a problem." Then I gave her the 4 words that changed everything for that house and everyone in it. I won't tell you what I said yet. Just know this: I didn't shout, I didn't beg, I didn't explain. I used the only real power they left me, the one they forgot I still had after 15 years away. I didn't grow up anywhere near a $9 million mansion. I grew up in a 2-bedroom shotgun house in South Georgia with more people than beds and a front porch that leaned like it was tired of holding us up. Summers were heat and gnats and the hum of a box fan that never quite reached the back room. Winters were space heaters we had to dance around so we didn't set the curtains on fire. My mother worked herself to the bone at a chicken plant, then at a nursing home, then cleaning offices at night. My father drifted in and out like bad weather, sometimes money in his pocket, more often excuses. By the time I was 16, I knew 3 things for sure. Nobody was coming to save us, hard work didn't guarantee anything, and land meant power whether people wanted to say it out loud or not. When my daughter was born, I looked down at her wrinkled little face and I swore she would never have to count roaches on the wall to fall asleep the way I did. I was young and broke and already tired, but something in me sharpened that day. I took whatever work I could find, nursing assistant shifts, waitressing, braiding hair out of my kitchen on Sundays. We moved from one shabby apartment to another, each one a tiny step up from the last. When other girls bought handbags with their first real paychecks, I bought second-hand textbooks and kept my CNA license current. Every dollar that didn't go to diapers or rent went into a coffee can under the sink. Then my cousin called from London. "They're hiring carers here," she said. "Pays in pounds. You can send real money home. It's hard, but it's steady." The idea of leaving my baby made my stomach twist, but the math wasn't lying. I could stay in Georgia and drown slowly in bills, or I could go abroad for a few years and maybe, just maybe, build something solid. My mother, God rest her, set me down at that wobbly kitchen table and said, "If you can stomach it, go. I'll keep her like she's my own. But don't forget where you came from when you get wherever you're going." I didn't sleep the whole flight to London, guilt buzzing in my chest like a trapped fly. But as soon as the first real paycheck hit my UK account, I felt the horizon shift. It wasn't glamorous. I wiped strangers, lifted bodies that weighed more than mine, learned to say love and cheers with an accent that made people smile. But after rent and food, I could wire back in 1 month than I'd been able to save in a year. I sent money to cover my mama's utilities, my daughter's school uniforms, the doctor's bills we used to stretch out on kitchen tables like bad news. On lonely nights, when my hands ached and snow fell outside my little flat, I'd sit on the edge of my bed and picture my girl's face, remember the feel of her asleep on my chest. "This is for her," I'd whisper, "so she never has to come this far just to be seen." I didn't plan to stay 15 years, but time has a way of slipping when you're climbing. One agency job turned into a promotion, then a chance to start my own home care service. I went from wearing the uniform to hiring the women who wore it, from answering to supervisors to sitting across from investors with spreadsheets and plans. Every time my business took a step up, I sent a step's worth of money home. I went back as often as I could those first years. Birthdays, Christmas, if I could swing the ticket. My daughter would run into my arms at the airport, chattering nonstop about school, friends, boys.
We'd sit on my mama's sagging couch, and she'd lean into me like she was trying to make up for the months we'd missed. But as she grew older, flights got less frequent. Her life rooted in Georgia. High school, prom, first heartbreak. Mine, for better or worse, rooted in the UK. Staff to manage, clients to keep alive, contracts that wouldn't sign themselves. We lived on video calls and text messages, me propping the phone on my kitchen counter while I cooked, her showing me report cards and hairstyles. When my business finally turned its first real profit, not just getting by, but extra, I went looking for land. I knew from watching my mother and grandmother that rent is a leash. I wanted my child to have something she couldn't be thrown out of on a landlord's whim. I found it by accident on a trip home when she was in her first year of college. A faded estate on the edge of a small town outside Atlanta. Big bones, porches that wrapped around, a lake glinting at the back. The old money white family that had owned it for generations was cash poor and ready to sell. The asking price made my eyes water. The banker's look when I showed up in my good dress with my UK statements made me stand a little taller. He said, "We don't get many, international clients." I said, "We don't get many black women with this kind of down payment." I slid the folder across the desk. We closed 2 months later. The house needed work. Plumbing updated, roof patched, walls repainted, but it was ours. I remember the day I told my daughter. We stood in that overgrown driveway, the keys still warm from the realtor's hand. She was 20 then, all legs and bright eyes, her hair pulled back in a puff like mine used to be. "What do you think?" I asked her, sweeping my hand toward the peeling columns. "It's huge," she breathed, half in awe, half in terror. "Mama, how?" "Doesn't matter how," I said. "What matters is why. I signed this with the trust in your name. You know what that means?" She blinked at me. "That it's mine? Ours until I'm gone, then yours. I'll go back to London, finish what I need to do. But you'll never have to sign another lease in your life. You can live here, rent rooms, have kids running through these halls if that's what you want. This is your anchor." She started to cry then, big fat tears that embarrassed her. "I don't deserve this," she said. "Haven't done anything yet." I put my hands on her shoulders and told her, "You deserve not to start at the bottom just because I did. Don't make the mistake of thinking you have to suffer exactly the way I did to be worthy of good things. Your job is to build farther than I could, not bleed the same way." We walked through those empty rooms together, planning where the couch would go, where a home office might be, where she could paint or write or study. She talked about grad school, about maybe hosting study retreats for other girls from my side of the town. I left Georgia that trip feeling like I'd split myself in two, the half that stayed anchored in that mansion with her, and the half that flew back to the drizzle and gray of Heathrow. Every month, I wired money for taxes, insurance, the contractors who fixed the pipes I'd never see burst. On bad UK days, I'd open the emails from the estate agent with updated valuations and smile at the way the number crept up. 4 million, 5 million, 6 million. By the time those last big contracts hit and I sold my home care business to a larger firm, they told me the market had pushed it close to 9 million with the improvements in land. In my head, I saw my daughter walking through those halls with confidence, hosting dinners she chose, closing her own deals from that home office. I assumed no news meant she was busy thriving. She sent pictures, the kids in the yard, her husband at the grill, the family on the porch. I saw her smiling in those shots and told myself everything was fine. I should have looked harder. In the last 5 years abroad, I called stand. Time zones, kids' schedules, my meetings. When I did catch her, she always sounded tired. I'd ask, "You taking care of yourself?" And she'd laugh it off. "You know how it is, Mom. House, kids, his parents, his work dinners. I'm just grateful we've got the space." Sometimes I'd say, you know that house is under a trust for you. Don't let anybody make you feel like you're a guest in your own place. She'd say, I know, and change the subject. When I said I was finally ready to come home for good, to help with the grandbabies and see what she'd done with the place, she sounded nervous. Oh, wow, that's, soon. We'll be here, she added quickly, but there was a quiver under the words I didn't want to unpack over a crackling line. I told myself it was just shock, maybe a little resentment. After all, I'd missed a lot. It didn't occur to me that in the 15 years I'd been away building the house on paper, somebody else had been busy building a story in her ear about what that house really meant and who it really belonged to. I walked up that driveway thinking I was coming home to a fairy tale ending. Mother returns, daughter lives like a queen in the castle mom bought her. I didn't know yet I was walking into a story where my child had been gradually convinced she was lucky just to sleep in a back room of the very mansion I'd signed over for her future.
The first cracks in the picture should have been obvious, looking back. At the time, they just sounded like life. At first, our calls were full of plans. I'm painting the front room this weekend, she'd say. We're thinking of turning the back room into a study. She sent me pictures of paint swatches taped to walls, of boxes arriving with fragile stamped on the side. Then the tone shifted. His mama's here a lot, she mentioned once, voice tight. She says it's too much house for just me and the kids when he travels. I asked, is she helping? My daughter changed the subject. Then came the first temporary house guest. His brother lost his job, she said during one rushed call. He's staying with us until he gets back on his feet. I frowned in my London kitchen. Staying with us, she'd said, like it wasn't her name on the trust documents. For how long? I asked. She laughed without humor. You know how it is in this family, Ma. Till turned into months. The brother on the couch became the brother with the designated room. Then her father-in-law slipped a disc, and suddenly her husband's parents were recuperating in the master suite because stairs are bad for their backs. My daughter's voice got more tired with each call. It's just for now, she'd tell me. They help with the kids. But the photos told a different story. In the backgrounds of her grandbaby pictures, I began to recognize the faces of her in-laws more often than hers. The husband's mother sitting at the head of the dining room table. The husband's father giving tours to his friends on the porch, his arms sweeping across my land like a preacher claiming a harvest. One holiday, she sent me a video of the grandkids opening presents. It was sweet, chaotic. Then I heard a man's voice say off camera, "Aren't you grateful Nana and Papa gave you such a big house to run around in?" Nana and Papa, not your grandma in London. Something in me tightened. Why did he say it like that? I asked her later. She hesitated. They see it as all of ours, she said carefully. You know how his people are. They think in terms of the family. They've done a lot for us, too. More than I have? I asked, bitterness slipping out before I could catch it. She sighed. Ma, don't start. You left. They're here. It's not a competition. That one stung more than I let her hear. I reminded myself she was overwhelmed, that she was only seeing one side of the equation. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the story of that house was being rewritten while I was gone. Flat-out disrespect started creeping in the little story she told me. His daddy said I'm lucky I married in when I did, or I'd never seen a kitchen like this, she recounted once, laughing in that brittle way I recognized as a shield.
I told him Mama bought this kitchen, and he just waved his hand like I'd said something cute. I felt my jaw clench. "What did your husband say?" I asked. He said not to make a big deal, that his daddy says stuff like that to everybody. Then there were the chores. "I thought having a big place would be nice," she confessed once, "but there's always something to do. His mama's particular. She wants the baseboards wiped, the silver polished. Says a house this nice needs to show right. I'm always on my feet." "You can hire help," I reminded her. "That trust was set up to give you breathing room, not chain you to a mop." She laughed hollowly. "Help costs money, Ma. You know he don't like unnecessary expenses. Besides, his family think if I'm home, I should be doing it." At some point along the way, my daughter stopped talking about her own career. When she first moved into that house, she had a job with a nonprofit, counseling girls from neighborhoods like ours. Slowly, "I'm just taking a break to be home with the kids" turned into "I haven't been back since, and he don't see the point in me going back for what they pay." "Your work matters," I told her. "Even if it don't bring in big money, it matters." "To you," she said quietly. "To him, it's just me playing social worker while he carries the load." I should have seen the pattern. Her world was shrinking to that house while his and his family's world expanded inside it. On one call, she mentioned they were fixing some paperwork to lower taxes. "His uncle's in finance," she said. "He suggested we put the house under the family LLC. It's still mine, they just handle it." My stomach dropped. "Did you talk to my lawyer before you signed anything?" I asked sharply. "We didn't want to bother her," she said. "It was just some forms. His uncle said it was standard." "Standard for who?" I snapped. "For men who want to make sure the woman on the deed can't sneeze without their permission?" She bristled. "You don't know him like I do," she said. "He's not like your dad. He loves me." That was another cut I didn't show her I felt. The old argument. My experience made me negative. Her optimism made her loyal. I backed off on the phone. I shouldn't have. The main conflict crystallized the day she apologized for calling me late. "Sorry, Ma. It's hard to talk when they are around." "They?" I echoed. "Your in-laws? Your husband?" She sighed. "All of them. This ain't just our house anymore. It's theirs. They're always here. They've rearranged the rooms. They got their mail coming here. Their friends over on weekends. They talk about the family's house like I'm just lucky to live in it." "You are the family whose house this is," I reminded her. "You and me. That's what those papers say." "That's not how it feels," she said. That line stuck with me. Not how it feels. Because in the end, practicality is one thing, lived reality is another. Legally, she might still have a claim. Emotionally, practically, she'd been demoted from owner to maid in everyone's mind, including her own. When she finally told me she was doing cleaning for extra money, I thought she meant elsewhere. "You got a side hustle?" I asked. "Good for you." "Nah," she laughed bitterly. "Just here. They say as long as we stay in rent-free, I might as well earn my keep." Something in me snapped. "Rent-free," I repeated. "Baby, that house is, you're the beneficiary. They're staying there because you exist, not the other way around." "Try telling them that," she muttered. "They say your money bought it, but his family keeps it running. His mama reminds me all the time that if it weren't for their guidance, taxes would have eaten me alive. My lawyer's guidance is the only one that matters. Have you reached out to her at all?" "I don't want to rock the boat," she said. "Kids need stability." That was the refrain that killed me. Her desire to keep the peace for her children, the same way I had swallowed disrespect to keep a roof over her head when she was small. History looping. On my last visit, before things got really quiet between us, I suggested casually, maybe I should come back for a bit, help with the kids, see how you doing. There was a silence on the line I didn't like. Now, she said, you're busy. The business will be fine, I replied. You are my business too. It's just, she lowered her voice, they'll feel some kind of way about you staying here. They already talk about you like you left and never looked back. I wired money every month, I said, heat rising. That house, I know, she cut in quickly. I know what you did. They don't care. They tell the kids this is the Carter estate now. Your name don't come up much. That was when the conflict stopped being abstract in my mind. Up until then, it had been me worrying from afar and her minimizing. In that admission that my own grandchildren were being taught to see my sacrifice as their daddy's inheritance, I realized a story was being written in that house without my input. One where my daughter was not heir, but housekeeper. One where my absence had been weaponized, my contributions erased. I wanted to hop on a plane that day. Instead, contracts bound me up for another year. I told myself I was being dramatic, that when I got there, things would look different, that no one could really turn my baby into the help in her own home. Then I stepped out of that car, saw her in that uniform, heard her call another man sir on my porch, and understood the main conflict wasn't going to be convincing a bank that the property was ours. It was going to be convincing my own child that she was not what 15 years of slow control had taught her to be.
Your child sound tired on the phone from 5,000 miles away. It's another to stand in her tiny back bedroom and realize the tired had sunk into her bones. That first night after the owners went to bed and the house finally stopped buzzing with their voices, my daughter slipped into the room they've given me, a guest room that was somehow bigger and nicer than the one she slept in with laundry baskets stacked against the wall. She closed the door quietly, like a guilty teenager sneaking in past curfew, and for a moment we just stared at each other in the lamplight. Up close, I saw what the Georgia sun and those long days had done to her. Fine lines at the corners of her mouth from clenching it, shadows under her eyes that no concealer could hide. "Mama," she whispered, and the way that one word broke on her lips told me everything she hadn't said in 15 years. I opened my arms and she fell into them like she'd been holding her breath since I left. We cried the way grown women cry when you can't pretend anymore. Quietly at first, then ugly, hiccuping sobs that leave your chest aching. When she finally pulled back, she wouldn't quite look me in the eye. "You shouldn't have come," she said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "They gonna make this hard." "They already have," I said, glancing around at the room. "What are you doing sleeping in a broom closet while your in-laws spread out in the master?" She winced. "It's just how it's worked out," she said weakly. "His mama has surgery, needed the big bathroom. His daddy can't do stairs. It's easier this way." "Easier for who?" I asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she started picking at a loose thread on the bedspread. "Ma, please," she whispered, "don't start a war. I'm tired." That was the part that cut deepest. Not just that she was being used, but that she'd been tired so long she couldn't imagine anything else. I took a breath, pushed my anger down low where it could burn without burning her. "Tell me the truth," I said. "All of it.
Not the version you've been feeding me over the phone. How do we get from you signing a trust deed in college to you answering the door in a maid's uniform? It took a while. The words came out in stops and starts, like a pipe that hadn't run in a while. Rusty at first, then pouring. She told me about how after I left, the house felt too big, too empty. How falling in love with a man from a respected family made her feel rooted, safe. How his mother had charmed her by calling her the jewel of the family at first, before the compliments turned to critiques. She told me about the small requests that grew teeth. Can my brother crash on the couch, turning into, he needs a room, is just for a while turning into, well, where else is he supposed to go? She told me how her husband had talked her into signing tax papers she didn't fully understand. How his uncle, a so-called financial whiz, had said, "Trust me, sweetheart, this is how we protect your asset," while sliding documents across the table she was too exhausted to read line by line. She admitted, eyes full of shame, that she'd ignored the little voice in her own gut that had whispered, "This doesn't feel right," because it was easier to believe in their story than to pick a fight she didn't feel equipped to win. "And the uniform?" I asked quietly. "When did that come into it?" She laughed bitterly. "The first time one of his mama's friends called me the help by accident and nobody corrected her, I figured I might as well look the part. At least then the disrespect matches the costume." My hands clenched. "You are not the help in this house," I said. "You are the reason this house exists in the first place. If we pull your name out of the story, this is just another piece of property his family could never have afforded." "Try telling them that," she muttered. "To them, you're some myth from overseas they resent me for still loving. They say you abandoned me for money, that they're the ones who kept me afloat when you weren't here. Did you believe them?" Silence stretched between us. Finally, she shook her head minutely. "Sometimes," she whispered, "when the kids were screaming and the bills were due and you were a voice on a bad connection saying, 'It'll all be worth it,' I wanted to be mad at you because being mad at him and his people felt too dangerous." There it was, the heart of the conflict laid bare. My absence twisted into a weapon. My sacrifice recast as selfishness, her survival instincts teaching her to attach herself to the people physically present, even as they leached her dry. I could have drowned in guilt right there. Spent the rest of the night saying, "I'm sorry for every year I wasn't in these rooms with her." But some part of me knew if I let guilt drive now, I'd only add another layer of martyrdom to a house already heavy with it. So I did what years in business had taught me. Separated feelings from facts. "Do you have copies of any of those papers you signed? The ones for the LLC? The ones for the tax reasons?" She frowned. "They're in his office," she said slowly. "He don't like me in there." "He don't have to like it," I replied. "Tonight, when everyone's asleep, we gonna like it just fine." She stared at me, a flicker of the old boldness back in her eyes. "Mama, we can't just—" "We can and we will," I cut in. "I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm asking you to look at your own life on paper. If you gonna be working yourself to the bone in this place, the least you can do is know what you working under." That night, while the house snored, kids in their rooms, in-laws in my master suite, husband dead to the world with a glass on his nightstand, we moved like ghosts. My daughter slipped me into the hallway outside his office, hands trembling. "The desk," she whispered. "Bottom drawer." Years of cleaning had taught her where everything lived, even if she was never meant to claim it. I slipped in, closed the door softly behind me, and turned on the small lamp. The office was every cliche. Leather chair, shelves of books no one had read in years, family photos that somehow included everyone but me. His laptop was open but locked. I went for the paper. The bottom drawer was a treasure chest of arrogance. File folders labeled Carter Family Holdings, Lakeside Estates, Utilities 9M, as if naming everything after themselves made it so. I pulled out the ones that smelled like lawyers and ink and trouble, took photos with my phone of every signature, every header. My daughter hovered at the door, her fear palpable. "Hurry," she whispered. "If he wakes up and finds you in here, if he wakes up and finds me in here, he'll get a preview of the conversation that's coming." But I moved quickly all the same. Within 20 minutes, we were back in my room with a digital folder full of evidence and our hearts pounding. I sent the files to my attorney with a simple message: "Explain this to me." The reply came the next afternoon while my daughter was scrubbing bathrooms and her mama was on the phone bragging about our grounds to a friend. It was a long email, but the important line was this: "They've attempted to wrap the asset into an LLC without proper authority. The original trust is still intact. On paper, your daughter is still the beneficiary with significant control. Control they've likely been exercising without legal right." I called her right away. "So what does that mean?" I demanded. "It means," she said carefully, "that if we move quickly and smartly, we can reassert the original terms. We can present their actions as an overreach at best and potential fraud at worst. But you need to be prepared. This will not just be about property. It will be about family, about who you are willing to disappoint in order to rescue your daughter from a situation you never meant for her to have. Are you ready?" I looked out the upstairs window at the perfectly trimmed hedges, at my granddaughter's tricycle abandoned on the lawn, at my daughter hunched over a mop on the patio. I left to give her a house, not to watch her die in it by inches, I said. "I'm ready." "Then," my lawyer replied, "we need to get them all in a room, and we need to make sure they know you are not the myth they've been using to keep her in line. You are here. You are lucid, and you remember exactly what you signed." That was the true turning point. Not the moment I saw my daughter in a uniform, not the whispered confessions in her tiny bedroom, but the moment I chose to stop being a voice on the phone and become a problem in their living room. The moment I decided that the story of this house, my house, was not going to end with my child taking orders in someone else's surname.
The day of the meeting, the house smelled like lemon polish and nervous sweat. My lawyer insisted we do it there. "People behave differently on their own turf," she'd said. "Let them sit in the space they think belongs to them when they hear the truth." I'd already told her my 4 words on the phone: "I want everything audited." And she had. Every deed, every bank account tied to the trust, every Carter Family Holdings document his uncle had cooked up at their dining table without me. What she found has set this whole thing in motion. Now, everyone sat in the formal living room like they were waiting for a reading of the will. Fitting, I supposed. My daughter perched on the edge of an armchair beside me, hands knotted in her lap, the maid's uniform traded for a simple dress she hadn't had reason to wear in years. Her husband sprawled on the end of the couch, trying for casual, one ankle crossed over his knee. His parents sat up right next to him, his mama's pearls shining against her throat, his daddy's hand resting possessively on the armrest like he owned the wood. My lawyer, sharp suit, sharper eyes, stood by the mantel with a folder in her hand, waiting for everyone to stop shifting. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she began. "I know Mrs. Ellis's return from the UK was a surprise." "We're always happy to see family," his mother cut in with a tight smile. "This is all just a bit sudden." "Family," I echoed under my breath. "Funny word." My lawyer didn't rise to the bait. As you know, she continued, 15 years ago, Mrs. Ellis purchased this property and placed it into a revocable trust for the benefit of her daughter, Miss Johnson, with specific terms around control and use. Recently, there have been changes on the ground, and Miss Ellis asked me to review the status of that trust and any related entities. I told her my honest recommendation. I want everything audited. She agreed. The husband shifted, mask slipping for a second. We haven't done anything wrong, he said quickly. We've just been managing things. Property this size doesn't take care of itself. No one said anything about wrong yet, Mr. Carter, my lawyer replied calmly. I'm just going to lay out what the documents say, so we're all working from the same sheet of music. She opened the folder and pulled out the original trust. This, she said, is the trust instrument from when the property was purchased. It names Mrs. Ellis as grantor and co-trustee, with Miss Johnson as primary beneficiary upon Mrs. Ellis's death, subject to certain conditions. It specifically states that any transfer, encumbrance, or change of ownership interest requires the written independent consent of Mrs. Ellis and, in some cases, court approval. She laid it on the coffee table. My daughter's eyes filled as she stared at her own name in print, the name she'd half convinced herself didn't matter anymore. My son-in-law's father leaned forward. We're familiar with that, he said. That's why we had our attorney draw up the LLC. It's a common vehicle for high-value properties. We folded everything into Carter Family Holdings for efficiency. Yes, my lawyer said, pulling out another stack. These are the LLC documents. The problem is, you cannot fold a trust into an LLC without following the procedures set out in the trust and under state law. These, she tapped the pages where my name was either missing or scrawled in a signature that vaguely resembled mine, do not meet those requirements. In fact, some of these filings suggest Mrs. Ellis consented while she was out of the country, which would have required either her physical presence before a notary in Georgia or an apostille from the UK. We found neither. When I asked Mrs. Ellis if she'd ever signed anything transferring her trustee powers or beneficial interest, her answer was very clear. No. All eyes turned to me. I held my daughter's hand a little tighter. I don't put my name on paper I don't understand, I said. I've signed exactly 2 big things in this life, this house and the trust that kept it from being taken while I was gone. I don't know what those squiggles are, but they're not mine. My lawyer nodded, which means, she continued, that your so-called efficiency move does not have legal weight. The trust remains as it was. On paper, this property is still held for the benefit of Miss Johnson, with Mrs. Ellis retaining significant control while alive. Any mortgages or liens taken out without her consent could themselves be problematic. The room went very quiet. The husband's jaw clenched. His mother's hand flew to her pearls. His daddy barked out a hollow laugh. This is ridiculous, he said. We've poured money into this house. Upgrades, taxes, maintenance. We've treated it like it's our own because it is our own. That should count for something. You've been living rent-free on land you never paid a dime to acquire. You've used my money, my daughter's labor, and my absence to build a little kingdom with your name on the gate. The fact that you painted the walls and planted a few hydrangeas don't entitle you to the throne. My granddaughter, who was peeking around the doorway, shrank back at the hard edge in my words. I forced myself to soften my tone when I glanced at her. Go on, baby, I said gently. Grown folks are talking business. She scampered away. The husband turned to my daughter then, as if looking for backup. You knew about all of this, he said accusingly.
You were there when we signed things. You can't just switch sides now." That lit a spark in her I hadn't seen in a long time. "I was there," she said, voice shaken but loud for once. "But I didn't know I was handing my children's inheritance over to your family's ego. I thought we were protecting what my mama built, not erasing her from it." His mother scoffed. "Oh, please," she said. "Without our help, you wouldn't have known what to do with a place like this. You'd have lost it to back taxes or let it fall apart." My lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Carter, our firm has been handling the tax payments and filings for this trust since its creation. There has never been a delinquency. The only late payments we've seen in the last 5 years coincided with the first time your son's name showed up on a check." Her mother's face flushed. "So what happens now?" the husband demanded, anger bubbling to the surface now that his veneer of calm had cracked. "You come back after 15 years and just what? Kick us out? Take everything?" My lawyer looked at me. It was my cue. I took a breath, feeling every mile of ocean I'd crossed, every hour of overtime, every long-distance call where I told myself, "Trust them, they family," gather in my chest. "What happens now," I said slowly, "is that we stop pretending this is your house." I leaned forward, making sure each of them met my eyes in turn. "Legally, this property belongs to a trust I set up for my daughter. Emotionally, it has belonged to you all far too long. That ends today. You will all have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. After that, if you are still here, you will be here as tenants with a lease and rent I set, or you will be here not at all." The words landed like stones in a still pond. Ripples of shock, then outrage. "You can't be serious," his father sputtered. "We have roots here." "My grandchildren have roots here," I corrected. "You have habits." "We have nowhere to go," his mother wailed, eyes glistening just so. "You would throw us out on the street?" "You have pensions, other properties, a church full of people who think you walk on water. You'll land. You just won't land on my daughter's back no more." The husband took a step toward me, then checked himself when he saw the officer standing in the doorway. "My lawyer's quiet insurance policy. You're vindictive. All that time overseas turned you into someone who doesn't care about family." "No," I said softly. "All that time overseas taught me what happens when you don't protect what you work for. I cared about family when I bought this house so my daughter would never have to sign a lease. You cared about family when you changed the story to make your people the heroes of that purchase." I turned to my daughter. "What do you want?" I asked her in front of everyone. "Do you want them here? Truly? As equals? As guests? As bosses?" She stared at the floor for a long beat, wrestling with years of conditioning. Then she lifted her head and met my gaze. There it was. The same fire I saw when she was 8 and refused to let a boy cut in front of her in the lunch line. "I want my house back," she said quietly. "I want to walk through my own front door and not feel like I have to ask permission. I want my kids to know this is where they come from, not where they serve." Then she did something that made every person in that room.
She turned to her husband and said, still in that soft but unwavering voice, "And if that means you find another couch for your brother to sleep on, another bed for your parents to recover in, then that's what it means." His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked from her to me to the lawyer, realizing the ground he thought was solid had never really been his. "We'll see about this," he muttered finally. "We have lawyers too." "I'm sure you do," my lawyer said pleasantly. "They're welcome to call me. In the meantime, the audit is complete. The notices will be filed today. You can fight the paper if you like, but the ink is on our side." The Carters left the room in stages. His mother first, sobbing into a linen handkerchief. His father grumbling about ungrateful women. The husband last, pausing in the doorway to throw one last parting shot. "You'll regret this," he said to my daughter. "No one else is going to take care of you like we did." She flinched, then straightened. "That's the point," she replied. When the door shut, the house exhaled. My daughter sank back into the armchair like her strings had been cut. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice small. "Good," I said, surprising her and myself. "Being scared means you understand this is big. Do it scared anyway. I will be here this time. Not a voice on the phone, not a myth they twist. Me." The climax wasn't just them hearing they had to leave. It was her hearing, maybe for the first time in a decade, that the person who'd set this place up for her wasn't some distant benefactor whose name got edited out of family stories. I was back in the flesh in their fancy living room, using the same stubbornness that got me on a plane to London to drag this narrative back where it belonged. They thought they'd inherited a docile old woman's silence along with her house. Instead, they inherited a black woman with a signed trust, a good lawyer, and no more patience for watching her child live as a maid in a mansion she paid for. The next 30 days were a kind of slow, rolling earthquake. Nothing collapsed all at once, but you could feel the ground under that house shifting every single day. At first, the Carters didn't believe it would really happen. His mama marched around the kitchen, slamming cabinets, telling anyone who'd listen on the phone, "She's bluffing. We practically own this place. After everything we've done, a judge won't let her put us out." His daddy stomped around muttering about uppity women and their fancy lawyers. My son-in-law threw himself into calls with his own attorney, pacing in circles on the back porch, his words a mix of bluster and fear. "She can't just take it back. We've improved the value. My name's on the mail. There must be a way to contest the trust." My lawyer, for her part, was unbothered. Every time his attorney tried to rattle her with long letters full of legalese, she'd forward them to me with little summaries. They're huffing, nothing substantive. When he threatened to sue for sweat equity, she replied once, CCing everyone, "Your clients are welcome to file whatever claims they like. In the meantime, the trust stands, the notices to vacate are valid, and any attempt to retaliate against Ms. Johnson or Mrs. Ellis will be documented and brought before the court." What shocked them most wasn't the law. It was the fact that this time the law wasn't on their side. They were used to being the ones who could drop phrases like "my attorney" and watch doors open. They'd forgotten I had one too, and that my pockets, thanks to years in the UK, were deeper than theirs. Week 2, the first cracks in their facade of defiance started to show. His mama came to my daughter in the pantry, wringing her hands. "Baby, talk to her," she pleaded. "She listens to you. This is all a misunderstanding. Tell her we need more time." My daughter wiped her hands on the dish towel and for perhaps the first time since she'd married into that family, said no. "You had years. While I was running myself ragged for you, you could have saved, downsized, bought your own place. You chose not to. Don't ask me to pay for that choice with the rest of my life." His mama stared like someone she thought she knew had just spoken in tongues, then left without another word. Their church friends were next to be shocked. Word travels fast in small southern congregations. One Sunday, the pastor's sermon on bearing one another's burdens took on a pointed edge as he mentioned honoring those who have gone abroad and returned to bless their families.
I sat in the pew with my daughter and grandbabies, feeling the sideways glances from people who'd only ever heard the Carter version. Me as the selfish mother who ran off and left her child. After service, more than one deacon's wife pulled me aside to say, "We didn't know you were the one who bought that place. We thought..." They trailed off embarrassed. "You thought it came from out the sky with his last name on the deed?" I finished for them, not unkindly. "Now you know better." Some were bold enough to ask, "Are you really putting his folks out?" I met their questions with the same answer. "I'm putting my daughter back in." By week 3, the packing started in earnest. It was amazing how much stuff they'd managed to stuff in the corners that weren't theirs. My daughter and I watched from the upstairs balcony as moving trucks pulled up, as his brother hauled out weights and game systems that never belonged in my basement, as his parents' mattress, bought with money from a line of credit taken against an asset they didn't own, was carried down the front steps. My granddaughter tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma," she whispered, "where are Nana and Papa going?" I knelt down so we were eye to eye. "To their own home," I said gently. "This one is yours and your mama's, and mine, for a little while." She bit her lip. "Will we still see them?" "That depends on how they act," my daughter cut in, voice firm but soft. "Family is about how you treat people, not where you sleep." Hearing my once timid child say that in front of her children did more for my peace than any legal paper. The day they finally left, my son-in-law stood in the foyer with his last box, jaw clenched, eyes darting everywhere but at me. "You win," he muttered, "for now." I tilted my head. This wasn't a game, but if it were, the winning move would have been treating my daughter like a partner instead of an unpaid housekeeper. He opened his mouth as if to retort, then seemed to think better of it. He walked out without saying goodbye to his kids. That told them more about him than anything I could have. In the weeks that followed, the shock waves kept coming, for them, and in a quieter way, for us. Neighbors who'd only ever known my daughter as that girl who keeps the Carter place running now learned her surname and mine. Contractors called to confirm new orders with us instead of with Mr. Carter. The bank officer who had been so quick to process those suspect LLC filings didn't know where to look when my lawyer marched in with documentation and questions about their lax procedures. There were repercussions, maybe an internal investigation, maybe just a quiet tightening of standards. But the message was clear. The old assumption that certain last names could skate by without scrutiny was cracking. Inside the house, the biggest change wasn't what left, but what arrived. On my lawyer's advice, we brought in a financial planner who actually listened to my daughter. She sat at the kitchen table, this time across from someone who saw her as the client, not an add-on. I don't want to be house poor. I want this place to work for us, not the other way around. They talked about renting the guest house out to a traveling doctor or professor, about using a portion of the land for small, high-end retreats that my daughter could host and be paid for. "You like taking care of people," I reminded her. "You were good at your nonprofit job. You can build something here that feeds that part of you and still pay the bills." She looked skeptical at first, then thoughtful. It shocked her, I think, to realize she didn't have to choose between martyrdom and eviction. She could choose work that valued her. We also made a decision that raised a few eyebrows. I didn't move into the master suite. People assumed that once the in-laws were gone, I'd plant myself in the biggest room as a sort of victory flag. Instead, I let my daughter have it. "You were 20 when I bought this place for you," I told her. "You spend more nights crying into a pillow in that little back room than you spent feeling like a queen in this house. It's your turn." I took a small front bedroom, sunny in the mornings, close to the kitchen to hear my grandbabies rifling for snacks. Some folks were shocked when they found out I wasn't reclaiming every inch of physical space. "You did all that just to give her the big bedroom?" one cousin said, half admiring, half confused. I smiled. "No," I said. "I did all that so she'd remember she didn't have to earn what was already hers by doing everybody's laundry." The biggest shock, at least to them, came a few months later when the revised trust documents went out. In addition to solidifying my daughter's position and blocking any future partner from tinkering with the deed without ironclad protections, we added something new, a clause setting aside a portion of the property's eventual sale value for a scholarship fund in my mother's name, dedicated to single black mothers in Georgia trying to go back to school. When the Carters heard about it through the grapevine, because of course they still hovered on the fringes of community, they were scandalized. "She's giving our family seat away to strangers," his mama fumed in the grocery aisle where one of my cousins heard her. My cousin just smiled and said, "Oh, honey, it was never your family seat to begin with." For me, the resolution wasn't about watching them leave with their tails between their legs. It was about walking through those halls with my daughter and seeing her shoulders unhunch a little more each day. One evening, I found her standing in the front hallway, hand resting lightly on the banister. "I feel like I'm seeing this place for the first time," she admitted, "not as work, as home." That's because you're not looking at it through their eyes anymore. You're looking at it through your own and through mine. We still had things to untangle between us, resentments about the years I was gone, unspoken hurt on both sides. But now we had a real chance to do it without an audience shaping the narrative. We had mornings where we drank coffee on the porch together before the kids woke up. Afternoons where she'd come back from a meeting with that old light in her eyes, telling me about a new program she wanted to run using the house as a base. And nights where my grandbabies would climb into my lap and ask for stories, and I tell them not just about London and airplanes, but about her mama at 10, smart as a whip, promising me she'd make this place shine. It wasn't lost on me that the people most shocked by how things ended up were the ones who had assumed my story was over. They thought I was the poor black girl from Georgia who got lucky in pounds, the mother who vanished overseas, the name on the check they'd rewritten as blessing while cutting me out of the retelling. They didn't expect me to come back at all, much less to come back with my eyes open, my paperwork in order, and my daughter's hand firmly in mine.
For years, people back home called me blessed. They saw the photos of my life in the UK, heard about the contracts, the fact that I'd managed to buy a whole estate in Georgia, and they said I was proof that hard work pays off. What they didn't see were the nights I laid in that little London flat, staring at the ceiling, wondering if my daughter would resent me for every bedtime story I told into a phone instead of into her pillow. When I signed the papers on that mansion and put it in a trust with her name on it, I thought I was fixing all of that in one gesture. Here, baby. Here is the house you'll never get evicted from. Here is the address they can't look down on you for. Here is my apology, my absence, my love turned into brick and wood. I thought giving her that roof would automatically shelter her from everything I'd had to fight. What I understand now is that a gift that big without tools and boundaries is a little like dropping a treasure chest in the middle of a crowded street and walking away. If you don't teach the person you're giving it to how to protect it and how to protect themselves, there will always be someone nearby ready to convince them they were just lucky to be there, while they quietly drag the box into their own house. I left home thinking money and property were the highest form of love. They are a form of love, but they are not a substitute for presence, for hard conversations, for saying, if anyone ever tells you this house is theirs because they manage it, you tell them, my mama bought this. Sit out.
I assumed my daughter knew the full story because she'd been there when I signed the documents. I didn't account for the 15 years of daily living that would happen after I got back on that plane. The slow, steady drip of other people's words in her ear. Your mama chose London over you. We're the ones actually here for you. We're the ones who keep this place up. I thought the trust would speak for me. I forgot that silence is easy to talk over. Coming back and seeing her in that uniform hurt in ways I don't have pretty words for. There was a part of me that wanted to drown in guilt, to spend every day since saying, I'm so sorry I left, like an incantation. But guilt, if you let it drive, will have you making decisions that feel like penance instead of protection. I could have said, let them stay, I owe them, and kept punishing myself by watching my child live below what both of us knew she was worth. Instead, I chose to let the guilt turn into resolve, to say, I can't change the fact that I was gone. I can change the fact that I'm here now and what I do with the tools I still have. A lot of us from where I'm from weren't raised to reclaim things. We were raised to be grateful for whatever corner we could carve out. That's why my daughter, with her smart mind and big heart, could talk herself into believing she should be thankful to scrub floors in a house her own mother set up in her name. Watching her unlearn that has been the most beautiful and painful part of this whole mess. The first time she told the contractor, no, I want it this way, and didn't look over her shoulder for permission, I almost cried. Not because the kitchen color mattered, but because I could see her starting to occupy space she'd been hunched over in for years. If you a parent listening to this, especially if you are one who crossed oceans or state lines and sent money home in place of hugs, know this. You are allowed to go back and check what your sacrifice actually did. You are allowed to say, this isn't what I meant, and make adjustments. People will tell you it's too late, that you'll stir up trouble, that the family won't like it. The same family that is happy for you to work yourself into the grave rarely complains when the fruits of that work land in their laps. They only complain when you pick those fruits up and move them out of reach of their entitlement. And if you're someone on the other side of this, married into a blessing you didn't build, ask yourself honestly, am I honoring the story that created this roof, or am I rewriting it so it flatters me more? It's a hard question, but better you ask it in your own mirror than have a woman like me show up with a lawyer and make you face it in her living room. In the end, the thing that shocked them the most wasn't that I could change papers or hire attorneys. It was that I was willing to disappoint them in order to rescue my daughter. For a long time, I thought being a good mother, a good black woman, meant absorbing every blow so my child didn't have to. Now I know sometimes it means stepping between your child and the people they have learned to obey and saying no more, even if those people share their last name. It means risking that your own child will be mad at you today so they can be free tomorrow. When I stand on that porch now and watch my grandbabies run across the yard, I don't see $9 million. I see my mama's hands scrubbing chicken plant floors. I see my own hands wiping down strangers' sinks in London. I see my daughter's hands raw from scrubbing a house she didn't think she owned. And I feel something like peace, knowing that for once, those hands are finally working for us and not just for someone else's comfort. That, more than any court ruling or market valuation, is what makes the whole journey mean something.